Wendy looked sadly at the phone lying in front of her and sobbed quietly. She buried her beloved husband, Chris, the day before. His life was suddenly cut short by a heart attack. God, how is that even possible? He was only 30 and already had heart problems. Wendy told her friend, Linda. Well, dear, the Lord has His own plans for each of us. Nobody knows how much time we have on this earth, Linda replied. It all seemed very strange, and Wendy understood it better than anyone else. Chris was just an ordinary manager at the office, and he never even had any conflicts at work. Moreover, the very atmosphere of the office was very calm and quiet, without any fights or even arguments. So what could it have been? What made Chris develop a heart problem? Unfortunately, no one could provide an answer to that question. The funeral was very quick, which saddened Wendy deeply. Pamela, Chris's older sister, took charge of organizing all of the mourning events. Despite living in a neighboring state, she dropped everything to come over and help. Wendy couldn't think straight. When you're only 28 years old and burying your beloved husband, your mind simply shuts down. Moreover, Pamela turned out to have some experience in these matters and organized the funeral as quickly as possible. Why torment yourself by looking at your deceased husband? It won't lead to anything good, just more suffering and tears, Pamela said. Wendy was mostly grateful for her help. Thanks to Pamela, the mourning events didn't drag on for too long. However, it didn't make Wendy feel any better. She stood by the coffin and couldn't believe what had happened. Her beloved husband's life was cut short way too soon, depriving him of all the joys of life in an instant. At that moment, Wendy decided to place Chris's phone in the coffin with him. Frankly speaking, even Wendy herself couldn't explain the reasons behind her actions. She was guided by an impulse, not logic. Why did you do that? Why give a phone to a dead man? Do you expect him to call you? Don't be foolish, dear, Linda said. But Wendy stood firm and didn't want to back down from her decision. She didn't understand the reasons behind her actions, and even if she did, she wouldn't have done anything differently. Wendy felt an internal push, an urge to do it. It was impossible to put into words, but she had no intention of proving her right to anyone anyway. She simply did what she felt was right. Everything else didn't seem to matter. Now, in the early morning light, Wendy was looking at the phone lying in front of her and waiting for a call. She didn't know what kind of a call she expected to get. Her eyes were red from crying and her lips started trembling at the mere thought of her late husband. Having decided to make herself a cup of coffee to feel more alert, Wendy turned away to face the stove. At that moment, the phone started ringing, causing her to startle. It's him. It must be him. A troubling thought flashed through Wendy's mind. But when she answered the call, it wasn't Chris on the other end of the line. Instead, it was a bank employee offering extremely favorable conditions for a loan. Wendy replied absent-mindedly, not fully grasping what she was saying. The hope that had been born in her heart was immediately extinguished, like a falling star that illuminated the sky for a brief moment. You silly girl, what did you hope for? That Chris would call you from the other side? That's just crazy, Wendy thought. Deep down, she knew that miracles didn't happen, and Chris would never contact her from the afterlife. Life continued despite the pain and bitterness of losing her husband. To distract herself from her grief, Wendy decided to go to the store. She didn't know what she needed to buy or why she was going there. Perhaps she just wanted to be around people to forget her pain for at least a brief moment. As she reached the door, the phone rang. Surprised, Wendy walked over to the table. This time, she saw the name of the caller and nearly fainted from shock. It was inconceivable and unsettling and made Wendy tremble with her whole body. The call was coming from Chris's phone. The very same phone that she put inside his coffin. Moreover, it was a video call, which only added to Wendy's astonishment. Holding the phone in her hands, she answered the call, trembling with fear. She was afraid of seeing Chris's lifeless face calling her from the other side. But when Wendy heard the caller's voice, her unease grew even stronger. It was a gravelly baritone that couldn't possibly belong to Chris, and she realized that from the first seconds of the conversation. Having opened her eyes, Wendy saw a man in his 50s on the screen. He had an unkempt beard and hollow cheeks that looked peculiar at the very least. Wendy's astonishment knew no bounds. "Who are you? What's your name? And how did you get Chris's phone?" The man on the screen looked uncomfortable, and then, in the same hoarse voice, "I'm Jack, miss. Just Jack. Who is this Chris you're talking about?" Wendy took a deep breath, ready to unleash an angry tirade, but the homeless man interrupted her shamelessly. "Oh, I get it, miss. It's probably that poor man with the phone lying in the coffin, right?" Wendy gasped as her heart started pounding. She still couldn't understand what was happening and how her late husband's phone ended up with this man. As if reading her thoughts from a distance, the homeless man named Jack said, "Please don't mistake me for a grave robber, miss. I live at the cemetery, so I always know what's going on here. I think we should meet up and talk. I'll be waiting for you near the gatehouse. And please, don't call the police. I don't need any trouble right now." "Okay, I'll be there soon," Wendy exclaimed and hung up the phone immediately. Her mind was in chaos. She felt uneasy from the overload of information. Just yesterday, Wendy buried her husband, and today this man was calling from his phone and offering to meet up. All of it was very strange, and Wendy wanted to figure it all out right there and then. She wasn't afraid of the city cemetery, especially since the homeless man scheduled the meeting during the day when the graves and tombstones didn't seem so intimidating. As promised, the man was waiting for her near the gatehouse. The moment Wendy saw Jack with her own eyes, she knew that her intuition didn't deceive her. He truly was homeless, surviving on odd jobs provided by the cemetery. Looking at Wendy, the man lowered his gaze in embarrassment and said, "As you probably guessed, I live off the cemetery. People pay me to tidy up the graves or remove the weeds and paint the fence. I actually used to be a spy and served in the special forces. At least half of the world owes me their lives." Wendy struggled to maintain her composure and not burst into laughter. Of course, she understood that the homeless man was shamelessly lying to her and simply trying to divert her attention from his aimless life. But when Jack shared a few of his spy tales with the woman, her patience snapped. "Can we get to the point? Your biography is truly fascinating, but how did you get my husband's phone?" The homeless man hesitated for a moment and looked at Wendy reproachfully. It was evident that he was basking in the glory brought on by such keen attention from a very attractive young woman. Having finally satisfied his ego, he said, "Well, here's how it all went down. I was cleaning up a burial site near your husband's grave yesterday. The weather was calm and windless, the kind when you can hear a fly, so I heard a moan, a quiet but eerie one. I looked around and realized it was coming from the grave, from your husband's grave. So I dug it up, and there he was. Your husband turned out to be alive." "What do you mean, alive? Are you sure you didn't make a mistake?" the woman asked, turning pale. "No, miss. Your husband is sleeping in the gatehouse. He's fine, but he's very weak. I'm sorry I didn't call the police. I was afraid they would take me into the station. You know how they treat homeless people. That's why I took his phone and called you," Jack said. Wendy didn't hear the man's last words before she already burst into the gatehouse and saw Chris lying on a cot. He was pale and weak, and his chest was rising and falling rhythmically, giving Wendy hope that everything could be fine. Having made sure that Chris indeed was alive, Wendy immediately called the police and an ambulance. But the most surprising thing awaited Wendy when they took her husband's blood samples at the hospital. It turned out that Chris had a powerful tranquilizer in his blood, which put him in a state of lethargic sleep. Either because the culprit miscalculated the dosage or because the drug didn't work as intended, but Chris woke up inside the coffin 3 hours after his own funeral. If it hadn't been for Jack, Chris would have never been able to get out of his own grave. Apparently, luck was on Chris's side that day, and the incident with his phone was clear evidence of that. A criminal case from an attempted murder was opened by the police, and it led to an intriguing investigation and the search for the culprit. It all became clear a week later when the investigator found a woman named Pamela Watson. Shortly before the attempt on Chris's life, she got a notification about a substantial inheritance left by a deceased distant relative in Nevada. And the problem was that Chris was also included in the will, as he was Pamela's brother. Few people knew that they weren't actually biological siblings. Anna and Bill Watson adopted Pamela after they had been unsuccessful in having their own child. Shortly thereafter, Anna found out that she was pregnant. It seemed like a real miracle, which brought immense joy to the couple. Pamela knew that she wasn't their biological daughter and always remembered that fact. Deep down, she resented Chris and dreamed of becoming the only child in the family. It's hard to say what would have happened next if it hadn't been for the inheritance incident that prompted Pamela to take drastic action. She bought the tranquilizer on the black market and used it to put Chris to sleep. Having drugged her brother with poison tea, she transported his body to another part of the city and informed Wendy about his death. By bribing the morgue staff and the funeral service workers, Pamela managed to arrange for a swift burial of her still living brother. Her confession during the court trial was so horrifying that even the jurors shuddered in fear. Not even the most seasoned persecutors with years of experience could have imagined something that horrible. Pamela received a deserved punishment and was sent to serve her sentence at the women's wing of the state penitentiary. Chris recovered and now enjoys his life again. As a reward for his rescue, he gave his phone to the homeless man, the same phone that Wendy put in his coffin for some unknown reason. Having become their family friend, Jack visits Wendy and Chris every Sunday, never ceasing to thank them for food and shelter. The couple is always happy to see their guest, who entertains them with his spy tales that can rival any writer's imagination.